Welcome to episode number 2 of the Sizzle Basketball Podcast. I'm going to continue what I did on the first podcast where I talk about two teams, one in the first half of the segment and one in the second half of the segment. So it'll be one Eastern Conference and one Western Conference team. So today, the Eastern Conference team we're going to talk about is the Wizards, and then in the West, I'm going to talk about Utah. So I'm going to start with Utah. This season has been unreal for Utah. They're number 1 in the West right now. They're 3 games above Phoenix. They're 36-11. They've been winning games consistently. They've been doing it on both ends of the floor, rebounding. They move the ball really well. And they're really well coached. So this is a team that has taken huge leaps forward from previous years. And this is also a team that is very young too, so they have a bright future ahead of them for a long time. But really, the biggest thing that stood out to me this season for this team is the depth that they've been able to have. Right? I mean, this is something that this team has really struggled with in the last couple of years. And a lot of these guys have come in, off their bench, and look at Jordan Clarkson. I mean, he should win Sixth Man of the Year this year. Let's talk about his game for a second. I mean, he's been great. He shoots the 3-ball really well. He's aggressive, scores the ball at a crazy rate. He plays defense too. This is a guy who, when I looked at, a couple years ago when he was in Cleveland, even with the Lakers in the beginning of his career, he was a guy who was just all over the place. You never knew if he was going to give you a good scoring night or a bad scoring night, because there were a lot of nights where he'd score 30 and shoot 60%. And then the next 5 or 6 night games in a row, he would shoot 15% and score under 15. So, but that hasn't been the case this year. He's been a consistent scorer every single night he comes out and plays. And that's been huge for them because they couldn't really rely on Jordan Clarkson that much last year because he was a guy who, was kind of on and off for them last season. So, with that being said, with his, ability to score consistently this year, it's really helped his team because he's averaging, I want to say 18 a game. But when you get a guy off your bench to average that much, you don't really need great players, that come off the bench around him. Because he can kind of carry the load, right? They're the only team in the league that has a guy that comes off the bench that can score that well. So when you have this guy who can come off the bench and score this kind of rate and this efficiently, the way he's been efficiently scoring this season, right? He's shooting the ball around 42%. You can live with that. Shooting a 3-ball 35%. Perfect. Free throw, he's shooting 95%. That's crazy. That stat really jumps out to me because he gets on the line a good amount. And it's pretty much when he gets on the line, it's automatic that he's going to make both free throws based on the percentage, right? So, that's been another big factor for this team is that not only can he score in isolation, he can also get other guys involved. He's an underrated passer. And he's physical. He's good at gaining contact. And when he gets to the line, he makes both free throws most of the time. So, this is a guy that this team has loved this year. He's been great for him. He's brought in a spark plug. If Mitchell struggles and Conley struggles, he's been the guy. He's been the guy who can bring him that spark plug on the offensive end of the floor. So, yeah, I mean, can't really say enough about what Jordan Clarkson has done this year, and he should definitely win Sixth Man of the Year, and I think he will win it. But we'll see what happens at the NBA Awards in a couple months when they announce that. But definitely should win. Another guy that Utah may have holding up an award at that ceremony is Rudy Gobert. He may win Defensive Player of the Year again for the 3rd time in his career. He's been great on the defensive end. Really, I mean, you can't really say too much about what Rudy Gobert's done this year. You can't say enough, about what Rudy Gobert's done this year. Because he's been great on the defensive end, as always, right? Probably the best defensive season of his career, in my opinion, if you've really watched him. Unreal. I know Simmons is a close second, but we'll see who ends up winning that race. But on the offensive end, Rudy Gobert has developed even more than what he has in the last couple of years. He's been very efficient, as always, right? He's always been efficient, but he's been more efficient. He's expanded his game a little more. He still doesn't have a mid-range jumper, but he'll shoot those hook shots a little further out, than he has in the past this season. He's posting out more. He's putting his back to the basket more. They're giving him the ball more down low, instead of just hoping, can he get a second chance get an offensive board and get a second chance bucket. That was kind of a lot of where his baskets came from the last couple of years. Now they kind of let him do ISO in the post sometimes, and he's been able to score well down there. So another guy that they can go to if they have to on the offensive end of the floor if a couple guys are struggling. So and I saw something the other day in the media that talked a little bit about how some people believe Rudy Gobert is overrated, and I think that's one of the dumbest takes I've ever heard. In not just now but in basketball history, I think that's one of the dumbest takes. What are you judging it off of? One bad game, somebody dunking on him, him missing an easy layup. That's what you're going to judge it on. Then, obviously, people that are saying that don't really watch basketball. They're box score fans. They just look at the box score. If you go and you actually watch Utah Jazz games, you'll see the effect that Rudy Gobert has. His ability to switch defensively, his ability to even guard guys out on the perimeter, which almost no centers in the league can do. How aggressive he is when it comes to rebounding on both the offensive and the defensive end. How smart he is with the shots he takes on the offensive end. He doesn't take any dumb shots ever. He only takes shots he knows he can make. Underrated playmaker too. He's the kind of guy that when they give it to him down low, if he doesn't have a good look, he moves it. Been another big factor for Utah this season. So, anybody that calls Rudy Gobert overrated, watch basketball. Don't just watch the highlights. Don't just look at the box score. Actually watch the games. And you'll see the true value of Rudy Gobert. If they took Rudy Gobert off this team would really struggle on both ends of the floor, especially on the defensive end, right? We know that, but on the defensive end, they would really struggle. Because you wouldn't really have anybody down low who can just lock down opposing power forwards and centers. And you wouldn't have anybody down low who can give you an extreme amount of second chance opportunities, right? So Rudy Gobert is such a great player. He's an all-star player. He's an all-NBA player, in my opinion. He's one of the best centers in basketball, in my opinion. Other than Jokic and Embiid, I think he's number 3. Right? And I think a lot of people bring up Bam, but as great as Bam is, and I like Bam a lot, it's just I think Rudy Gobert has a bigger effect on the game than Bam does. Bam may be a better all-around player, but if you really sit and you watch the games, you'll really see why Rudy Gobert is a better player, right? But, no disrespect if you go with Bam. Bam's an unreal player as well, but, what Rudy Gobert has been able to do this season, and it's just been incredible. So, an opportunity to go watch Utah, make sure you tune in and you pay close attention to what Rudy Gobert does on the defensive end of the floor and offense. Don't just see, he has a nice block. Okay, yeah, but see how he rotates defensively. See how he calls out plays defensively. See how he does different things defensively that make him a staple of this team on the defensive end and make him arguably the best defensive player in the league. So, huge for Utah this season, this Rudy Gobert, man. How about Donovan Mitchell, right? This is the best season of Donovan Mitchell's career. He's been extremely efficient, right? Scored the ball really well like every year. He's played great defense like he has every year of his career, but I think the one thing that's really taken Donovan Mitchell's game to the next level this season is something that I saw, Kenny Smith and Shaq and Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson talking about a couple weeks ago. They were talking about how the last couple of years Mitchell was kind of just a scorer, right, and a good defender. But now he's taking his game to the next level in terms of he's been able to get everyone else around him involved, right, which has been big because he's a threat to see. Everybody knows he's a huge threat to score the ball. You got to pay attention to him and keep an eye on him every second of the game because he gets the ball in isolation. And most of the time, the defenders are toast. So, for him to be able to develop into a great passer, which he has developed into this year, it's been huge for this team because if he's not able to go ISO and he's missing shots, he can expand his game and get everyone else involved. And then as the game wears on and comes down to the end, if he's not shooting well, which doesn't happen a lot, he normally shoots really well, but if he's not shooting well, teams may start to take their eye off him and put, and focus more on Conley and Clarkson and other guys that are scoring that night. And then Mitchell can go do his thing at the end of the game in terms of scoring. So his ability to get everyone else involved just opens up his game so much and opens up the game of everyone else on that team. So, been the biggest step that I think Mitchell's taken this year has been his ability to get everyone in the game involved. And can't really say enough about what Mitchell's done for this team this year either because He's the best player on this team. They have the best record in the league right now. So, with that being said, it's like there's a lot of disrespect towards Mitchell's name right now. Um, just in general, I feel like from the whole league, there's a lot of disrespect, and I don't think it's fair, in my opinion, because I think that Donovan Mitchell should be up there in terms of MVP contention, right? And they came out with the let me pull it up here, but they came out with the MVP ladder the other day. Okay, here it is. They came out with it. All right. So right now they have Jokic at number 1, Lillard at 2, Harden at 3, Giannis 4, Luka 5. I'm gonna name the top 10. LeBron 6, Embiid 7, Kawhi 8, Kyrie 9, Booker 10. Okay. Mitchell should be 4. And I'm gonna tell you why. Over the last couple of years, the NBA has determined the MVP based on numbers, but then another big factor in their MVP voting has been record. Mitchell has the numbers. He has the best record in the league. Why is he not talked about in terms of MVP conversation? Listen, Giannis is a great player. I like Giannis, but Giannis putting up the same numbers as he does every year. Nothing's changed. Giannis still doesn't have a jump shot. Right? Like, Giannis is still, Giannis is one of my favorite players, and Giannis is still a top 5 player in this league, no doubt. But he still doesn't have a jump shot. His game hasn't really improved this year. It's been the same game he's had the last 3 years. I don't know. I know, he's won back-to-back MVPs, but why should he be number 4 in the MVP race? Right? I think Jokic should be 1, or I think Lillard should be 1, Jokic should be 2, Harden should be 3, and then Mitchell 4. Luka ahead of Mitchell? Listen, Luka's unreal, and the numbers that Luka's put up this year is crazy. And he's had next to near no help because Porzingis has been injured. Hardaway's inconsistent, right? But Mitchell has the best record in the league. Why is he not even sitting in the top 10 MVP votes right now? How is that fair? Right? How is that fair? I understand he plays for an organization that a lot of people in the NBA might not, look at it and say, oh, that's a cool team, this and that, but how is that fair to take a guy out of MVP contention like that? A guy who has been the best player on their team that has the best record in the league. Guy who's averaging 25.7 with 5.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds, shoots a 3-ball 40%, 43% field goal, 84 free throw. I'm looking at the numbers right now. How is that fair? That's what I want to know, because I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why his name isn't even anywhere in the top 10. That's not right. Because, look at the years, as I mentioned, a lot of the NBA, they look at the record in terms of MVP, right? So, last year they gave it to Giannis because his team had the best record in the league, and the numbers were there. Mitchell's numbers are there, and his team has the best record in the league, so why can't the NBA put Mitchell in that conversation? It's utterly ridiculous how he's on that conversation. It's very disrespectful, but, I hope it's something that gives them more motivation when they get to the playoffs, right? I hope it's something that gives them more motivation when they get to the playoffs to play at an even higher level. Because, that's really disrespectful. And then I look at the rest of the list and I see LeBron. Okay, LeBron's had an unreal season, right? And all these guys the 10 guys that I named have all had unreal seasons. But you got a guy who's had an unreal season. His team has the best record in the league. He needs more talk in MVP ballots, way more. Because if I'm voting right now for MVP, he's my 4th guy, right? And he's not far behind anyone else, in my opinion. So, really ridiculous how he hasn't been put in that category for MVP. Like, how are you putting a guy, and this is just my personal opinion, right? As great as Kyrie is, how are you putting a guy like Kyrie number 9 ahead of Mitchell when Mitchell's had a better season than Kyrie? Mitchell's had a better season than Kyrie, in my opinion. Kyrie's unbelievable, but if you put Kyrie on the team and you flip him for Mitchell, I know they're different positions, but ask yourself, would Utah be where they are right now? No, I don't think so. Because Kyrie doesn't have the defensive ability that Mitchell has. Of course, Kyrie's a better player, but Kyrie can't play defense like Mitchell, right? I don't think Kyrie's the leader that Donovan Mitchell is. Kyrie's shown that he can't be a leader either. in the NBA, right? He's shown that multiple times. Nobody needs to prove that again. So, I mean, yeah, Mitchell's number 3 for me in MVP votes, but let me get off that and move on to the addition of Derek Favors for this team this season. How big he's been. Because, you look at the last couple of years, this was a team that really kind of struggled at the center spot in terms of backup. And now you bring in Favors. He's been really efficient on the offensive end, and he's a great defender, and he rebounds well. So he's a guy who's brought a spark plug along with Clarkson to this team off the bench. So always enjoyed watching Derek Favors his whole career, coming down towards the end of his career. But yeah, I mean, he's playing great, and I think they're happy to have him back with that team over there in Utah. Because he was there for a while with his career, but he's been a huge staple for this team because when he comes off the bench, he does it on both ends of the floor, and he does it efficiently, right? And, you look at the last couple of years, Rudy Gobert had to play pretty much the whole game because they didn't really have anybody at the backup center spot that could really do much for him. So now that you have Favors, it allows Rudy Gobert to have a little bit of the pressure taken off his game because he doesn't have to play, 40 minutes a night. He can play less. When you get pressure taken off your game, you play better too because Rudy Gobert doesn't have to look at it and say, okay, I'm going to play 40 minutes and then I'm going to be gassed out at the end. So you save Rudy Gobert's energy. You bring in someone off the bench who plays at a really high level. So another huge guy that they've been able to acquire this season. And then, of course, Ingles and Bogdanovic, right? I mean, Ingles, another guy that I look at and I say, very undervalued player. Ingles, Ingles is actually, if you watch him, he's a good defender too. Great three-point shooter. Underrated playmaker. They let him play the point guard spot a lot, actually, for this team. If you watch it, like Mitchell, a lot of times will bring it up, or Conley will bring it up, and then they'll just flip it right to Ingles before half court. And then Ingles will kind of run things on the offensive end for this team. But, yeah, I mean, Ingles has been huge, just like every other year for this team. So, very efficient, shoots the three ball really well. He's another guy who, if Conley or Mitchell or Clarkson are struggling, he can help them get out of that struggle in terms of his ability to score the ball efficiently. So, yeah, best season of Ingles' career, in my opinion, as well. And then Bogdanovic, I mean, this is a guy who, last season, I would say last season he played a little better than he has this season. The high production has still been there for Bogdanovic, and another guy who gets it done on both ends of the floor. So he's put a little bit of a post fade into his game, which has kind of helped his ability to, score in many different ways. And he's got a great three ball. We know that. He can put the ball on the floor here and there and make plays and get to the rim. So another guy that they're going to look for in the playoffs to really kind of help them. But one more guy I want to talk about really quick before I wrap the Utah segment up is Royce O'Neal. Now, in my opinion, Royce O'Neal is the most underrated player in basketball. And it's not even close. This is a guy who should get All-NBA second defensive team. I don't know if he'll get it because of the disrespect towards the Utah Jazz and the NBA, but he should get it. He's been unbelievable on the defensive end of the floor. And look at the way he shoots the ball. I mean, you look at him shoot the basketball, it's like he's just so efficient with that three ball, and he's so smart in terms of the shots he takes. He only takes shots he can make, right? Like, he's shooting a three ball 41% this year, and he's hit 78 threes. That's a huge mark because when you think about it, for a guy to start the power forward spot, that's where he plays, right? He gives it to them every night defensively, right? He's 6'3", which is crazy, but he can defend power forwards. Like, he's one of the very few guys in the league who's 6'3" who can defend the power forward spot because not only is he a good defender on the perimeter, he's a good defender in the post too. He's really physical. He's strong. Talks a lot too. He can get in people's head. So he's the guy who's rebounded really well for this team. He shot the three ball really well, and he's played great defense. And he's also taken a step forward in his ability to pass the basketball, which has been one big thing for this team. Like, he passes it pretty well. If he doesn't have a good look, he moves it around, just like everyone else on this team. And as I mentioned earlier, that's been a big thing with this team. The ball movement is always there every single night. When you move the ball the way Utah moves it, when guys are struggling, you can get guys out of their slumps because you're not asking guys to play ISO. When a lot of times when guys struggle, it's because they're playing a lot of ISO, and then they keep playing ISO and they struggle the rest of the game because teams can focus in on them defensively. When you move the ball the way Utah does, you get more open looks, more cutting, more things like that. So when guys are struggling, when they have good looks, they're going to be able to knock those down. When they're struggling, they cut to the rim, easy layup, easy dunk, right? So you allow guys to also get out of their slumps when you move the ball the way they move it. They moved the ball kind of like the Spurs did a while back, with Tony Parker and Danny Green and Kawhi and Tiago Splitter and Duncan. They moved the ball kind of like that team, in my opinion. So, Utah, team you got to watch out for in the playoffs. I think they can do some damage in the playoffs. But like I mentioned before, this is the team that's one of the best home teams in the league, and most likely they're going to be the 1 seed when this is all said and done. So Utah's going to be scary. No teams are going to want to go into Utah and have to play Utah in Utah more than they are able to play in their home arena. So another big thing to look out for is the fact that Utah should be the number 1 seed and they should get home court advantage throughout the Western Conference playoffs. So, yeah, Utah's going to be a tough team to beat. They've really improved on the offensive end of the floor. They've been great on the defensive end, which, something they've been great with the last couple of years. Rebounding, they're great. And this is a team that's just really in sync. They got great chemistry. They got a great head coach. So I'm really interested and excited to see what Utah's going to be able to do this season in the postseason. So that's it for session 1 of podcast number 2. And now I'm going to move on and talk about the Washington Wizards in the Eastern Conference. So for segment number 2, I'm going to talk about the Washington Wizards. Been really surprising how disappointing the Wizards have been this year. They added Russell Westbrook this offseason in the trade of John Wall. But yeah, I thought the Wizards would be a playoff team. I thought they would be a team that could get to the second round maybe. They've just really not played well. They haven't gelled well together. To be fair with the Wizards, though, they've had a lot of injuries. Thomas Bryant's only played like 10 games this year. Davis Bertans has only played a handful of games too. Ish Smith has been out a while. So, to be fair with this team, they have had a lot of key players that have been really hurt for this team. But yeah, this is a team that should be better than where they are right now. Beal's had an unreal season. Westbrook's had a good season, but at times it's like you watch Westbrook and it's like, okay, some games have been really good, some games have been really bad. Overall, I'd say he's had a good season though. But the biggest thing that I looked at for this team this year, even with adding Westbrook, it was like, okay, that should really help him, and I think it's helped him and it's hurt him in a way too. But the biggest thing for this team, I thought this year was going to be the development of Rui Hachimura, and he has been good at times and bad at times. It's just too much inconsistency from Rui. Just a guy that, some nights looks like, he could be an all-star player down the line, and then other nights looks like he's just an average player. He's pretty much averaging what he averaged last year. Struggling with the 3-ball again this year. But, defensively he struggles. That's a big thing with his team. They're not very good defensively at all. They struggle a lot on the defensive end of the floor. Westbrook doesn't defend too well, neither does Beal. Thomas Bryant has been hurt, but even when he's healthy, he's not a good defender. He's good on the offensive end, but he's not a good defender. Davis Bertans is not a good defender, right? So they have, and Roy is not a good defender either. But they have so many guys who can score. They don't score the ball bad. They score the ball well. They can't play defense. You can't be that good in the league unless you have 3 or 4 superstars. Sorry, you can't be that good in the league if you don't play defense unless you have 3 or 4 superstars, right? So this is a team that has, one superstar in Bradley Beal, but another guy who's really a star player now, and they don't play defense. So that's not going to work. You look at a team like Brooklyn, they can't play defense, but they have, 3 superstars, right? So they can get away with it. Wizards can't get away with it. They have to play the defensive end of the floor if they want to be competitive, and they don't do that. They don't rebound that well. There's just a lot of struggles with this team right now. And, I'm surprised Bradley Beal didn't request a trade before the trade deadline. I know there were a lot of rumors, and then he said he wanted to stay, which is really surprising to me because I don't really see the direction of this franchise. I don't see a positive direction for this franchise. So that was really surprising to me. And Bradley Beal is still relatively young. He's only 27. So he's got a lot, he's got a good amount more years where he's going to play at a really high level like he's playing now. So really surprising to me that Beal didn't request a trade before the deadline. I mean, maybe he likes being the number one guy in the team. Maybe he likes being the guy who puts up 30 plus a night every night, you know? But, I mean, to me, when I looked at him, I thought he was kind of getting really frustrated with it and really annoyed with it, but maybe that's not the case. So it would be interesting to see if they move Bradley Beal in the offseason. But for now, let's just stick to this Wizards team right now and what they possess right now. I mean, where does this team realistically end up in 3 or 4 years? I mean, what pieces do they have to build around, that will help Bradley Beal in the future? And the answer to that question is, in my opinion, is not many. Not enough, at least, right? I mean, Rui Hachimura has an opportunity to be a very good player, and I think he will when the time comes. I think he'll just be a guy who takes a little bit of time to develop, right? I mean, he's a guy who is physical down low. He needs to work on the defensive end of the floor. He's physical down low, right? He needs to work on his 3-ball. He's got a good mid-range shot. He rebounds pretty well. Not a terrible passer. So he definitely has something ahead of him, in terms of a positive future. But he's going to need to get that 3-ball in his game, and he's going to need to be a really good defender for that team because this team has a lot of young guys that can score the ball, but they don't have a lot of young guys that can play defense. So if they can use him as like a staple on both ends of the floor, that will really help this team's development moving forward, not just now, but in the future. And, they had a really high draft pick this year, so Danny Avdia. Kind of interesting the way they've used him. They haven't really used him that well. I think Danny Avdia is a guy who might be like one of the steals of this draft if they use him the right way. He can't play defense, right? Another young guy in that team that can't play defense, but he shoots a 3-ball really well. Kind of reminds me of like a small forward version of Porzingis. I think that's where he can get if they use him the right way, but they're not using him the right way at all. Like they don't give him the ball at all. They're not running the right design plays for him. They don't even really focus on him on the offensive end. Like only shoots a couple times a night, but he's a guy who has an ability to develop a really good 3-ball and has an ability to be able to develop like some sort of post game for a small forward, like a little bit of a post fade, a little bit of a put the ball on the floor into a mid range jumper. I think he has the ability to do that. It's going to be tough for someone like him to get to the rim a lot, but I mean, yeah, the upside offensively is there for Danny Avdia, but they just have to use him. They're not using him very well. I mean, it's a guy you took number 9, right? Like it's not a guy you took in the second round or late first round. That's a guy, you take a guy number 9, you got to use him, especially with the way the Wizards have struggled this year. Like, he's a guy that you just have to use more and you have to rely on more. And I think, and that's another reason this team has struggled this year is because they don't rely on him at all. They don't use him at all. And, I hope down the line that this is not the case for him, because if that's the case for Denny Avdia, then, his career with his 3 or 4 year tenure with the Wizards, however long his contract is, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a nightmare because he's not going to like the way he's used. He's not going to like the team or the organization. So hopefully, down the line, they have plans to actually use him as a staple in the offensive end. Hopefully, they look at him and say, okay, this is the guy we can rely on the offensive end if Beal's not getting it going. Hopefully, that's the case down the next couple of years. But yeah, I mean, I thought they would use him a lot more. I thought he was a guy who would kind of help this team, in a way, propel into the playoffs. And that hasn't been the case at all. So, hopefully, like I said, with his development, they can help him move in the right direction sooner rather than later. But yeah, as of now, he's one of the more underappreciated rookies because of his poor use by the Washington Wizards. So we'll see where he takes them in a couple years. But on to another young player, Thomas Bryant. He's only played 10 games this year, but the 10 games he's played, he was very good. But another guy who, again, was not very good for them on the defensive end of the floor. But offensively, he needs to work on his rebounding. But offensively, he scores really well. He's got a 3-ball. He's got a mid-range shot. He's decent down low in the post. He's good enough in the post. So this is the guy who should be in this team's future plans as well, in my opinion. He's the guy that they can rely on in the offensive end. If you can go and you can back him up with a Bismack Biyombo or somebody like that in the next couple of years, somebody that can just kind of come off the bench for him and just, if Thomas Bryant's struggling defensively, he can just come, somebody like Biyombo can just come off the bench and give them rebounding and defense. And Thomas Bryant's perfect because he's going to give you offense every night, and efficient offense too. So, the Wizards just need to surround some of these guys with the right guys, and they need to help Bradley. The main goal should be to help Bradley Beal stay in Washington, right? Because as of now, Bradley Beal doesn't want to trade, but that could change in the offseason. That could change next year on the trade deadline. So the goal here is to go out and get enough guys, or go out and get at least enough young guys and play them the right way, to the point where Bradley Beal's like, okay, I want to play for this team. You know what I'm saying? Bradley Beal looks at it and says, okay, this is a team I could invest myself into in the next 4 or 5 years, because this is a team that will be good in 4 or 5 years. As of right now, the future looks really bleak. So, you ask me, Bradley Beal's a guy who probably is going to get shipped either in the offseason or next trade deadline. And not because the Wizards want to ship him, because Bradley Beal just will get tired of the narrative of the Wizards losing and not being able to get guys that are going to be good for the future. So, needs to find their identity more than anything. And once they find their identity, once they're able to use some of these young guys the right way, that's when you'll see this team start to take steps forward and look like some of these young teams are able to look like. Maybe they'll look more like the Miami Heat. They'll look more like the Nuggets. I don't think they'll be as good, but at least they'll look like they can trend more towards that direction instead of trending down. So, big part of that, I think, is coaching too. So just finding the right guys and finding the right coaching staff and finding the right front office is a thing that this team has really struggled with. And if they could turn that around in the next couple of years, they could probably keep Bradley Beal. And they could probably honestly build a good team, because Washington's pretty attractive free agency destination. I mean, guys don't mind living in D.C. It's a nice city. There's a lot to do. But they're going to need to, they're going to need to try to move Westbrook during the offseason. I think his contract's too much. I would move Westbrook for a couple draft picks, or move him for a young guy who's not getting paid too much. Because if you can clear Westbrook's cap space, you can honestly maybe attract a big-time free agent, right? I mean, imagine they're able to go and attract like Julius Randle or something like that. So, you move Westbrook. It's too pricey. He's being paid too much. You move Westbrook, you are going to open up another max slot, and then even not just another max slot, you'll even open up like another small slot for a player who at a Marcus Smart level or someone like that who will get paid $20 million a year. You can open up, realistically, you can open up 2 decently big slots if you're able to move Westbrook for a couple draft picks or a guy who's not getting paid too much. Of course you want to be a good player. You don't want to get nothing back in return, literally. But, yeah, I mean, if I'm the Wizards, that's the first thing I'm doing this offseason. I'm moving Russell Westbrook, right? Because I think Russell Westbrook needs to be moved this offseason. And then the second thing I'm doing is I'm firing Scott Brooks. He hasn't been good for this team. I mean, what has he really done for this team since he's been the head coach? He's not using Danny Avdia in the right way. So, I mean, that when a rookie's not being used in the right way, that comes down to coaching. That comes down to how is the coach playing him? What kind of rotations is he getting? What kind of minutes is he getting? Is he being used in terms of plays? Is he a big part in their future development? Which is, that is more of front office. But in terms of the coaching part with Scott Brooks, yeah, I mean, Danny Avdia, I mean, that's on Scott Brooks, in my opinion, and his wrong use of Danny Avdia. So, yeah, those are the 2 things I'm doing this offseason. I'm moving Westbrook, and then I'm firing Scott Brooks. And then I'm looking at this team, and I'll sit down with Bradley Beal and say, okay, this is what we have moving forward. We have Rui Hachimura, we have Danny Avdia, we have Thomas Bryant, right? And then whatever young player draft picks come in from the Westbrook deal, we have that too. We have you a new head coach, a revamped front office, and then I think that's the situation that Beal would look at and say, okay, I can stay here. Beal would look at it and say, okay, let's get that contract extension done, because now I believe in this franchise. Now that you made the right moves and you made the right changes, I believe in this franchise and what they can do moving forward. So, a lot of changes need to happen in DC. It needs to start with the head coach, and then it needs to go into some of the, players as a Westbrook. And it's no disrespect. Westbrook can still play the game at a high level. It's just $41 million a year at his age, and his abilities trending down because of his age, right? It's just not a realistic situation for a team that's really, when you look at their team, they're really full of a lot of young guys. It's not the kind of guy you want on a team like that. You can live with Bradley Beal because Bradley Beal is superstar player, number 1. Number 2, he's only 27. Still relatively pretty young. So you can live with Bradley Beal, right, for 6-7 more years. Westbrook, not the case. Salary's too high too. So you can pay a guy like Bradley Beal $41 million a year if you're this team, $45 million a year, right? If you have to, and live with that. But Westbrook, that's a different situation. So yeah, I mean, moving Westbrook, I think will really help this team. You clear up cap space. You allow free agents to maybe come to the Wizards organization, right? You get some draft picks back. A win-win situation that the Wizards are able to complete those two moves. So yeah, I mean, the future, as I said, looks kind of bleak for the Wizards. But if they're able to make those two moves I mentioned, you can make your future go from bleak to a little promising. Because they do have some young guys that they can build around, and if they use them the right way, they can be a pretty special team in a couple years. So that's going to wrap it up for the podcast session number 2, day number 2. If you have any questions, make sure you just can message me on Instagram. My phone number is on my Instagram account. Again, it's Sizzle Podcast. So yeah, have a great one, guys, and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast.